My name is Jennifer, and I've spent most of my life alone. My parents died in a car accident when I was just 5, leaving me to be raised by my grandmother. She was my everything, my anchor, my guide, my only family. When she passed away shortly before my wedding, I thought I'd found a new family in Mark, my then fiancé. We'd been married for 2 years, living in a beautiful 2-story townhouse I'd rented before our wedding. It was in a perfect location, and when we got married, it made sense to stay there. Mark moved his things in, and I genuinely believed we had the perfect setup. I worked from home as an assistant editor-in-chief at a major publishing house, which meant I could manage both my career and our home life effectively. You know what's great about this house? Mark would often say, sprawled on our couch after dinner. It's big enough for family visits. My folks would love it here. I'd smile nervously whenever he brought this up. Yeah, maybe, I'd reply, trying to hide my discomfort. The thought of house guests made me uneasy, but I never really expressed this to Mark. Everything changed the day his sister Sarah showed up unannounced with her 2 elementary school-aged kids, Tommy and Lisa. I still remember opening the door and seeing them standing there, luggage in hand. "Surprise!" Sarah exclaimed, pushing past me into the house. "The kids need some quality time with their uncle. You know, male influence and all that." I stood there, frozen, as her children, Tommy and Lisa, ran straight to our pristine living room with muddy shoes. Mark appeared behind me, beaming with joy. "Jen, isn't this great? The kids can stay in the guest room, and Sarah can take the office." "The office?" I stammered. "But that's where I work." "You can work anywhere, honey," he said, already carrying their bags upstairs. "It's just for the school holidays." That first night, as I lay awake listening to the chaos downstairs, Sarah's kids fighting over the TV remote, Sarah complaining about the dinner I'd made, I had no idea this was just the beginning. I couldn't have known that this moment would set in motion a series of events that would completely unravel my marriage. The next few weeks were absolute hell. Sarah's kids were completely out of control. I'd never seen children behave this way before, and I'd edited plenty of young adult books about troubled teens. "Hey, stupid lady," Tommy would yell at me across the breakfast table, his hands covered in what I hoped was just mud. "I want pancakes." "Tommy," I'd try to reason with him, "first, please wash your hands, and second, my name is Jennifer or Aunt Jen." "Whatever, dummy," Lisa would chime in, deliberately spilling her orange juice on the floor. "Mom says we don't have to listen to you, because you're not really family." I'd look at Sarah, expecting her to correct them, but she'd just sit there scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up to say things like, "Kids will be kids," or "They're just expressing themselves." One particularly trying morning, I was trying to meet a crucial deadline for work when Sarah barged into my makeshift workspace in the living room. "The kids need lunch," she announced, as if I was her personal chef. "Something organic and sugar-free. Maybe some hand-pressed juice and gluten-free sandwiches?" "Sarah, I have a really important deadline," I started. "Oh please," she interrupted, rolling her eyes. "You just sit at home all day typing. That's not real work." Unlike being a mother. The days blurred together in an endless cycle of cooking, cleaning, and trying to salvage my work responsibilities. The kids would trash their rooms daily, wipe their dirty hands on the walls, and throw food during meals. The worst part? Mark seemed completely blind to it all. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the school holidays ended. The morning Sarah and the kids left, I took Mark aside for a serious conversation. "Mark, we need to talk about what just happened," I said, still exhausted from the ordeal. "What do you mean? It was great having them here," he replied, genuinely puzzled. "No, it wasn't. Your sister's kids were completely disrespectful, she didn't lift a finger to help, and I couldn't get any work done. Please, don't invite anyone else without discussing it with me first." Mark looked taken aback, but nodded. "Okay, honey, I promise I'll talk to you first next time." I spent the next few weeks trying to restore both our home and my mental health. The walls needed repainting, the furniture required deep cleaning, and my work deadlines had piled up dangerously high. During this time, I also remembered something important about our lease agreement. "Mark," I said one evening, "I should mention that our landlord is really strict about guests. The agreement has specific clauses about it." He waved his hand dismissively. "Don't worry about that. Actually, why don't we just put the lease in my name? That way, you won't have to stress about it anymore." We transferred the lease to his name the next day, though I continued to pay the rent from my account as usual. 6 months passed, and life had finally returned to normal. Or so I thought. I was catching up on work one Tuesday morning when I heard Mark's excited voice from the kitchen. "Of course you can stay with us, Mom. We have plenty of room. You and Dad can take the master bedroom. We'll move downstairs to the guest room." My stomach dropped. I rushed to the kitchen just in time to hear his mother saying something about sewage repairs and water being cut off at their house. "Mark," I whispered urgently, tugging at his sleeve. "Can we talk about this first?" He covered the phone with his hand. "Mom and Dad need a place to stay while their plumbing gets fixed." "What's there to talk about?" That evening, we had our first real fight in months. "You promised me, Mark. You promised we'd discuss these things together." "What do you want me to do, Jen?" he snapped. "They're my parents. I can't leave them without running water. Stop being so selfish." The next morning, my in-laws arrived with enough luggage to survive an apocalypse. Within hours, my mother-in-law, Linda, had rearranged my kitchen cabinets, criticized my choice of cleaning products, and commented on the layer of dust on the windowsills. "Jennifer, dear," she called from the living room, where she was directing her husband Bob about furniture placement. "When you're done with whatever it is you do on that computer, we'll need dinner. Something substantial, not those silly salads you make." I gritted my teeth. "Linda, I'm actually working right now. I have a deadline." "Working?" she laughed, looking at Bob. "Sitting at home all day isn't work. Now, about dinner." Days blurred together. I'd try to write emails while Linda stood over my shoulder, commenting on my posture. I'd be editing manuscripts while she demanded I do the laundry properly. Apparently, I'd been folding sheets wrong my entire adult life. "Mark," I pleaded one evening, "I need help. I can't keep up with everything." "You're right," he said, and for a moment, I felt relief. "I should take some time off work." I smiled, grateful, until he added, "Dad and I are thinking about a fishing trip. Get some real father-son bonding time." "A fishing trip?" I couldn't believe my ears. "That's not what I meant." But he was already packing his gear, excited as a kid at Christmas. The next morning, he and Bob left for their bonding experience, leaving me alone with Linda. "Well," she said, hands on her hips as the door closed behind them. "Since you're not busy with that little computer job of yours, we can finally get this house properly organized." I looked at my laptop, where 3 urgent emails from my boss sat unanswered, then at Linda's determined face. In that moment, I realized something had fundamentally shifted in my marriage, and not for the better. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, only a day after Mark and his father left for their fishing trip, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sarah standing there with Tommy and Lisa, surrounded by even more luggage than last time. "Surprise!" She pushed past me, kids in tow. The children have been crying for their grandparents. We couldn't stay away. I stood in the doorway, my mind refusing to process what was happening. Linda appeared behind me, squealing with delight. "My babies!" She hugged the children. "Sarah, darling, you're just in time." Jennifer was about to start dinner. I wasn't about to start dinner. I was about to join a critical video call with my publishing team. But nobody cared about that. "Actually, I have an important work meeting." Always with the excuses, Sarah rolled her eyes. "Mom told me you just sit at that computer all day pretending to work." The next few days were absolute torture. While Mark and Bob were off enjoying their fishing trip, I was trapped in a house of chaos. The kids ran wild through every room, leaving destruction in their wake. Sarah spent her days video calling friends, complaining about my cooking. Linda criticized everything I did. Nobody lifted a finger to help, but they all had opinions about how I wasn't doing enough. When Mark and his father finally returned from their fishing trip 5 days later, I was ready for a serious conversation. I'd rehearsed it in my head, firm but fair, explaining how impossible the situation had become. But before I could get a word in, Mark burst through the door, beaming with joy. "Isn't this amazing?" He spread his arms wide, taking in the chaos of our once peaceful home. "The whole family together. We should do this more often." I felt the room spin. "More often?" "Yeah. Dad and I were talking while fishing, and you know what would be great? If we all lived together for a while. Like a real family." The children ran past us, tracking mud across the floor I'd just cleaned. Sarah yelled from upstairs about needing fresh towels. Linda appeared to remind me it was almost dinner time. "Mark," I managed to choke out, "can we talk privately?" "Later, honey," he waved me off. Dad's showing everyone the pictures from our trip. That night, I lay awake in our cramped guest room, listening to the chaos above. Our bedroom, now occupied by his parents, creaked with every movement. Sarah's kids were still running around despite the late hour. Someone was using the microwave. Again. My phone buzzed with another email from my boss, "Second missed deadline this week. We need to talk." My life had become a nightmare. I was surrounded by strangers who treated me like their personal maid, children who destroyed everything they touched, and a husband who couldn't, or wouldn't, see what was happening. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to get some work done before everyone else got up. I'd started barricading myself in the home office, my last sanctuary in this chaos. But when I opened the door, my heart sank. Sarah was sitting at my desk, my laptop open in front of her, while Tommy and Lisa sprawled on the floor surrounded by construction paper, glue, and what looked like half the garden's worth of dirt. "Oh good, you're up." Sarah didn't even look at me. "The kids have a school project due tomorrow. We're using your laptop for research." "That's my work laptop," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have deadlines." "Don't be so selfish," Sarah cut me off. "This is for their education. You can do your little typing job later." I found Mark in the kitchen, grabbing his briefcase for work. "Mark, they've taken over my office. They're using my laptop. I can't work." "Not now, Jen," he rushed past me, checking his watch. "I'm late for a meeting. Just share the laptop, okay? It's for the kids' school." Feeling dizzy, I headed to the bathroom. Maybe a shower would help me think clearly. But when I opened the bathroom door, I nearly vomited. The toilet was overflowing with mud and dirt. Footprints tracked through the mess across the tile floor. Handprints decorated the walls. "Oh yeah," Lisa's voice piped up behind me. "We needed somewhere to mix the dirt for our project. Tommy said the toilet would be good, 'cause it has water already." I stood there, staring at the destruction. Somewhere in the house, I could hear Linda complaining about lunch plans. Sarah was yelling at the kids to get more supplies for their project. The toilet gurgled ominously. Something inside me snapped. Without saying a word, I cleaned up the bathroom. Every swipe of the mop, every scrub of the walls felt like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. When I finished, I went to our bedroom, the guest room now, and looked around at what my life had become. The next morning, I waited until Mark left for work. I listened to his car pull out of the driveway, counted to 60, then moved with quiet efficiency. I packed a small bag, some clothes, toiletries, my phone charger. The only thing I really needed was my laptop, which I managed to recover from the office while Sarah was in the kitchen complaining about the breakfast I hadn't made. Nobody noticed when I slipped out the front door. Nobody called out to ask where I was going. The hotel I checked into wasn't fancy, but it had 3 things my house no longer offered: silence, privacy, and peace. For the first time in weeks, I could hear myself think. I took the longest shower of my life, ordered room service, and actually managed to get some work done. I kept expecting my phone to explode with messages. Surely Mark would notice I was gone. Surely he'd be worried. Surely someone would wonder where the person who did all the cooking and cleaning had disappeared to. But as the hours ticked by, my phone remained silent. No missed calls. No frantic text messages. No concern at all for where I'd gone or why. After 3 days of silence, I decided to go home. Not because I missed them, but because I needed answers. As I approached our front door, I heard music and laughter spilling out into the street. What I walked into felt like a punch to the gut. A full-blown party was in progress. Streamers hung from the ceiling, plates of food covered every surface, and dozens of unfamiliar faces filled our living room. Nobody noticed me slip inside. Through the crowd, I spotted Mark dancing with Sarah in the middle of the room, both of them laughing. More relatives I'd never met were sprawled across our furniture, drinking and chatting as if they owned the place. I moved through the party like a ghost, until I found myself near the kitchen. That's when I heard them. And the best part is, my mother-in-law was saying to a woman I didn't recognize, we didn't have to spend a dime on hotels or restaurants. No repairs needed at our house at all, we just needed a change of scenery. The woman chuckled. Clever. And you got a free housewife out of the deal too. Yes, that Jennifer, Linda's voice dripped with contempt. Though she's not much of a housewife. Always complaining about her work. Can you believe she actually ran away 3 days ago? Not that anyone misses her cooking. They burst into laughter. I stood frozen, their words hitting me like physical blows. It had all been a lie. The broken sewage system, the urgent repairs, all of it fabricated so they could have a free vacation at my expense. Something inside me snapped. I pushed through the crowd until I found Mark, still dancing and drinking without a care in the world. We need to talk, I grabbed his arm. Now. He followed me to the hallway, looking annoyed at being pulled away from his fun. Your mother just told everyone there were never any repairs needed at their house, I said, my voice shaking. They just wanted a free place to stay. Did you know about this? He shrugged, and in that casual gesture, I saw our entire marriage crumble. So what if I did? Their family, they needed a break. A break? I'm the one who cooked for them, cleaned for them, while they insulted me and took over my home. And you knew it was all a lie? Oh, stop being so dramatic, he sneered. You don't understand because you're an orphan. The word orphan hit me like a slap. Images flashed through my mind, the car accident that took my parents when I was 5, my grandmother raising me alone, her empty seat at our wedding. That's right, he continued, his voice cruel. You're just a lonely loser who doesn't understand what it means to have a real, close-knit family. Maybe if you had one, you wouldn't be such a selfish bitch. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Without a word, I walked to our former bedroom and gathered what remained of my belongings. Behind me, the party continued as if nothing had happened. No one tried to stop me. Not even Mark. I'd barely settled into my hotel room and started apartment hunting online when my phone rang. Seeing the landlord's number flash across my screen made my stomach clench. Jennifer, Mr. Peterson's voice was tight with tension. I've been receiving numerous complaints from the neighbors about your property. My former property, I corrected him. I don't live there anymore. The lease was transferred to Mark Thompson, my husband, remember? There was a heavy pause on the line. Yes, well. The neighbors are reporting loud parties, excessive noise at all hours, children running wild in the common areas, and multiple unauthorized residents. That sounds terrible, I said, keeping my voice neutral. But as I said, it's not my responsibility anymore. Mr. Peterson sighed deeply. I want you to know that I'll be forced to take the harshest measures allowed under the lease agreement. I'm only calling you as a courtesy because you were such a good tenant for so long. I appreciate the heads up, I replied, but you'll need to discuss this with Mark. After hanging up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I didn't bother warning Mark about the call. Let him deal with the consequences of his choices for once. I found a lovely one-bedroom apartment in a quiet building across town. The landlady was a retired teacher who lived downstairs and appreciated that I worked from home. "It's good to have someone around during the day," she said. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night without being awakened by midnight snacks or early morning chaos. Then, 2 weeks into my peaceful new life, Mark called. "Jen, we're in serious trouble," he blurted before I could speak. "Peterson showed up today with a stack of papers. He's demanding double rent for the month plus some ridiculous fine." I continued typing my email, letting him ramble. "Did you know it was against the lease to have overnight guests? Or parties? Why didn't you tell me?" "I did tell you," I replied calmly. "Multiple times. You didn't want to listen." "Well, I didn't read the whole thing when we transferred it," he admitted. "Look, can you talk to Peterson? He liked you. Maybe you can explain." "Explain what?" I cut him off. "That you moved your entire extended family into a rental property without permission? That you've been hosting parties and disturbing the neighbors? That you ignored every warning I gave you about the lease agreement? The neighbors called the police last night," he continued desperately. "Mom and Dad got fined for noise violations. Sarah's kids were running through the building at midnight and someone complained. We need your help, Jen. You know how to handle these things." I thought about all the times I'd handled things for them. All the times I'd cleaned up their messes, literal and figurative. "No," I said simply. "No? What do you mean, no?" "I mean no. You have a whole big, close-knit family there to help you. Remember? The real family you said I wouldn't understand because I'm just a lonely orphan? Goodbye, Mark." I hung up mid-plea, turned my phone off, and went back to work. For the first time in months, I smiled. Sometimes karma doesn't need any help at all. The day after Mark's desperate call about the fines, my phone rang again. His name flashed on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. But something told me I should hear whatever he had to say. "They're gone," he said without preamble. "Mom, Dad, Sarah, the kids, they all left. Come home, Jen. We can go back to how things were." I almost laughed at the suggestion. Go back? As if the past months could be erased like crayon marks from a wall. "There's no going back, Mark. Please," his voice cracked. "Peterson's asking for so much money. Maybe we could split the costs? Half the fine and the double rent? I can't afford it on my own." This time I did laugh, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised even me. "Oh, now you want to split things fairly? Where was this concern for fairness when I was cooking and cleaning for your entire family? When they took over my office, my home, my life? But what about your real, close-knit family?" I interrupted. "Surely they'll help you pay. After all, I'm just a lonely orphan who doesn't understand family values, remember?" A week later, I heard through our mutual friend Amy that Peterson had evicted Mark. She told me he'd shown up at his parents' doorstep with his bags, only to be turned away. The irony was almost poetic. Mark's final call came as I was finishing dinner in my peaceful new apartment. My divorce papers lay on the coffee table, filed that morning. "Please, Jen," he begged. "I've lost everything, the house, my family. I made a mistake. We could start over. I've learned my lesson." I looked around my small but tranquil apartment. My laptop sat on my desk where I'd left it. My coffee mug was exactly where I'd placed it. No crayon on the walls, no mud on the floors, no chaos in the kitchen. "You're right about one thing, Mark," I said quietly. "You did lose everything. But you lost it yourself, one choice at a time. Every time you chose your family over our marriage. Every time you dismissed my feelings. Every time you watched them disrespect me and said nothing. I can change. I've already filed for divorce, I cut him off. And no, this isn't up for discussion. You showed me exactly who you are and what I mean to you. Consider it a gift, now I'll never waste another moment wondering. I hung up and blocked his number. Outside my window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. On my desk, a fresh manuscript waited for my attention. My phone remained blessedly silent. Sometimes, I think about what my grandmother would say if she could see me now. She always told me that family isn't about blood, it's about love, respect, and loyalty. She was right, of course. She usually was. I might be an orphan, as Mark so cruelly pointed out, but I finally understood something important. Being alone isn't the same as being lonely. And sometimes, the family you're born with or marry into isn't the family you deserve. Sometimes, you have to save yourself. And that's exactly what I did.